Hello everyone, you're listening to the Earful Tower. My name's Oliver G. This is a podcast about Paris, and if this is your first episode, you have come at a very special time. This is the season finale. Before I tell you about that, let me just say this show is brought to you by French Today, audiobooks for learning French. If you go to frenchtoday.com/earful10, you get a further 10% discount off their books. But you're here for a season finale, and what I typically like to do is make a season finale a bit of a special episode, and today is no exception. So this is the end of season 6, which is pretty baffling to me, but it's a pretty exciting sign too that this season finale is such a big deal. What you're about to hear is the audio from the first ever talk show that I've ever held in my life that I happened to do at the Australian Embassy in Paris. So just to give you a little bit of an explanation, you're about to hear the audio from it. I put a microphone right up by the speaker in the room, and when I say room, I'm talking about the living room of the Australian Ambassador to France, His Excellency Berne. In that room were 100 people, many of them Patreon supporters. If that's you and I'm talking to you right now, thank you for coming. Thank you for your support. Also, past guests from the show were there. Some friends and family were there. That's what you're going to hear from now. The topic of the day was the Australians making a mark in France. So the guests in order is Brendan Byrne, the ambassador, followed by Ruby Boukabou, an author and a writer and a tap dancer in Paris. Then we had author John Baxter, a friend of the show. He's been on the show lots of times. You've surely heard his voice before. And then it was Amanda Chapman, the lead dancer from the Moulin Rouge. All four of them are Australian. All four of them are doing cool things in France. I think I'll leave it over to them to tell their story. But first, you might hear that I've lost my voice a bit. That's the result of planning an event that kind of felt like a wedding, really. There was a lot that went into it, not least hosting it in an embassy, which adds all kinds of extra things to think about. But there's one thing I need to explain. The show ended with a visual joke, like a bit of magic, and I feel I have to explain that because in this audio version you won't really get it. The embassy is right in front of the Eiffel Tower, and if you can't picture this or you haven't seen pictures of it, you need to go and follow on Instagram or Facebook the Earful Tower. There are loads of beautiful pictures, but his residence is right in front of the Eiffel Tower, a couple of 100 meters. And my little magic trick at the end of the show was I said to everyone, you're going to hear it, but you have to imagine it. I said to everyone, well, what you're going to see now is something I've organized from the guys at the Eiffel Tower to say thank you to the embassy. And there's a little bit more joking there, but I started clicking my fingers, which you won't really hear. And as I clicked my fingers, the Eiffel Tower lit up in its brilliant sparkles. It does it every hour for 5 minutes. Sort of a crazy array of color just coming straight at you. And that was how the show ended. So you'll hear the people in the crowd saw that and then they started clapping. So that explains why they're clapping without me really saying anything. That's it. You can go and watch that if you're more of a visual person on YouTube. I live stream the whole thing. But otherwise, here's the audio version. Hang around at the end. I'm going to tell you a little bit behind the scenes on this episode and a few more words about the sponsor of the show, French Today. I want you to close your eyes now. Imagine you're sitting in the room. I'm going to start the recording with a little sort of pre-mingly buzz before I walked in off the balcony with His Excellency Brendan Byrne. You're in the room. You're sitting there. People are talking. Hang on, what's that? Is that Oliver and Brendan walking in the room? Okay, I'll leave you. Here we go.
Wow, it's going to be hard to top that one, I think.
It doesn't happen every Tuesday night at the Australian residence, does it?
Okay, so the idea for everybody, I think you already know the rough idea, but we're going to be going through a few guests quite quickly talking about Australians making a mark in Paris. Can you guys hear at the back? Great. Feeling good with your microphone? Everything good?
Natural.
Natural, okay, here we go. So is it fair of me from the beginning to say that Australians are making a mark in Paris and France?
Judging by that reception, I think it's absolutely fair. Australians love France.
That's I think what we should get into immediately is what is this obsession or because there are a lot of Australians here. Why?
Well, because we're on the other side of the earth from each other. And what's the country you think about when you're a kid? The States is big, it looms large, but then there's France. And the French think likewise of Australia in that way.
I was going to ask about that because a lot of French people go down there for like a year abroad.
240,000 in 10 years. It's completely changed the scene completely. And this is an investment like you wouldn't imagine in the relationship. So 20 years from now, even 10 years from now, these people are in positions of power. They know our country. They like us. It's a diplomat's dream.
And are there a lot of Australians here in France as well?
There's a lot right here, but at any one moment...
Especially that front row.
Yeah. Look, Australians are at ease here, so they're not necessarily telling us they're here, but we estimate there's about 20... I sound like I'm at the CSIRO, 20,000 Australians at any one time in France. 1 million Australians a year come through, and there are clusters of Australians in France. In Paris, in the southwest, where I was 2 weeks ago for the Quick Pro World Championship, the surfing culture, around Bordeaux with
Where
the wine.
Where are they surfing? They done this up?
Yeah, I don't surf, but
okay.
I know how to,
surfing the internet.
hold a surfboard.
Right.
And then down in the south of France, where the beaches and the money attract people.
Right. Biarritz and that kind of...
Or Biarritz in the southwest, and then Nice.
Okay, nice. I wanted to ask you specifically, it's kind of... This is your apartment that we're sitting in.
Yeah, well, when you said you were coming around on Tuesday night with some friends, I thought,
I mean, we need to just talk about the view for a second. It's a spectacular view. It's pretty crazy. And be brutally honest, do you get sick of the Eiffel Tower being so close?
Sometimes it interferes with my television viewing. I've written to the council, but I just can't get a response. Never get sick of it, because this Harry Seidler designed masterpiece, it affords you different angles, and of course it's got the beautiful axis that you rarely see from Montmartre through to the Eiffel Tower, which I actually think Baz Luhrmann, standing on that terrace, was inspired by when making that wonderful movie Moulin Rouge. And I know we have some people here from...
We indeed do have a guest from Moulin Rouge coming up a little bit later.
That's my conjecture, but next time Baz comes to the embassy vote, I'm going to ask him.
He's been here before?
Yeah, plenty of times.
Isn't that how Moulin Rouge starts, is with a sweeping shot of Paris up towards Sacré-Cœur? Yes. Well, that leads me into my next question quite nicely.
All your questions are nice.
Oh, thank you very much. My question was, besides the Eiffel Tower, do I sound a bit echoey? Sounds all right? Besides the Eiffel Tower, is there anything out there that we should be looking for? The people here tonight that are maybe taking in the view, or is there a particular favourite of yours out there?
I just think sniff the atmosphere, really, because where we are with France as a country is remarkable. I mean, we've never had a relationship as strong as this. I trust, I mean, you can see it from the terrace, you can see it inside the room. France and Australia are closer than ever. We found each other in a difficult set of international circumstances. $50 billion submarine deal, a free trade agreement coming through. There's a serious side to this relationship, which makes this sort of event that much more interesting, I think.
Now, while I would love to hear more about the submarine deal...
Yeah, I doubt that. I told him I'm going to get that in, right?
I also want to...
I did it.
You did very well. But I want to also sort of wind up with a question. Time's already running away, but I know I'm very interested by the president of France. Seems like a really interesting guy. I know you met him several times. Were you in Australia with him as well?
I was there.
So to finish up, what's he really like as a person?
He's a great leader, and he's a nice person. He's extremely warm. He's exactly what you'd expect to meet. A very warm, intelligent, engaging man who knows Australia, loves Australia, understands our role in the world, sees us through modern eyes, so understands Australia in that modern sense and sees us as a partner for the long term. I mean, really, it's an ambassador's dream to have a leader like that in the Elysee.
Brilliant. And speaking of understanding France, that's exactly what we're going to continue to do. So I'm going to thank you for your time up here on the hot seat.
Pleasure.
And I'll ask you. Thank you very much. That's His Excellency, the Ambassador. Thank you, and thank you for having us. But this brings me to my next guest, Ruby Boukabou. Welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you.
So you are you've got a lot of feathers in your hat. You're a TV presenter, you're an author, a writer, a tap dancer. So far, so good?
So far, so good.
So what is it that, in fact,
ménage.
what is the main one then?
kind of depends. So either I do lots of travel reporting and writing and lots of performing and tap dancing, but I need to have the balance.
Right.
If I'm doing too much writing, it's too much in the head, and too much performing, it's too much here and now. So I think it's like a nice contrast to have both the clouds and the groundedness.
Sure. And what about this new book that you've written?
Oh yeah, by the way.
I'll give you the plug,
it just happens to be
absolutely.
here. Wow.
I see it sitting right between us. So you've written a book you've written a book, the camera's right there. You've written a book, The Art Lover's Guide to Paris.
So it was a commission. I'd gone back to Australia, so I spent quite a lot of time in France, and I went to Egypt, got sick, went back to Australia in winter, and it's the good thing about living in Australia and France is you don't have to, like, winter doesn't have to exist. You can say no to winter.
Sure.
So I always spent 10 years of not having winter.
Hang on, you've not had winter for 10 years? Goodness me.
I don't like being cold.
Wow, no, me neither. And
so, autumn, spring, okay, but winter, I mean, February in France, come on.
And so you got...
And you get cold and then you suddenly go, I'm not French, I don't have to endure this. And then you find yourself in front of a travel agency and go, how much are tickets to Australia?
So where does the art come into it?
Okay, so then I do lots of, a lot of what I do is to promote Australian creatives in France or around the world. So I like to shine the light on Australian creatives, and whether they be chefs or writers or dancers or and to listen to them and let people know that how important it is for creatives to be part of our world and to value them.
And so there are a lot of Australian artists in the book as well?
So, no, this was a commission. Someone said, do you want to write a book about France? And I said, yes. And I said, music lover's guide, dancers lover's guide, and they said, art lovers. I'm like, okay.
So we'll get back to the art in a second, but there's something that you and I were speaking the other day.
Australian mafia.
Exactly. So you were saying there were a lot of Australians involved in Paris and a lot of different things, and you used the word mafia. I just thought maybe you could explain what that was all about. And should we be worried?
No, I mean maybe, but in a good way. So I do lots of performances and concerts, and the tap dancers who I work with often say, do you have the Australian mafia coming along? Which is beautiful. What they mean is the shorthand of Australian creatives in Paris. So I did an article for Qantas magazine. It was a cover story on Australian jazz musicians in Paris. And then afterwards, so I meet them all. They're all excited because they're happy to be on the cover of Qantas magazine. And at the end, I'm like, doing a gig next week. Don't have much money, but would love to have you along. And they'd say, yeah, I'd love to. It'd be nice. So we're doing these gigs in these underground bars around Mélismontant and Belleville, but with these like A-list Australian musicians that you could never afford in Australia or America.
Right.
And because you become friends with them, we had David Lewis, Wendy Lee Taylor, Alex Stewart, Daniel Hunter, and it's like the top of the top that just because we're living abroad, and I don't hang out just with Australians, I hang out with French people mainly, but you have that shorthand and they're more likely to say yes to do a gig because it's cool.
That's how the mafia works, right?
Right, and then so the other tap dancers go, why don't you just get one of your Australian mafia to come along?
Interesting. I wonder if all the Australians in Paris were part of a huge mafia. Who would be the godfather?
Like Hollywood, we have...
Looking at you, Mr. Ambassador. But I think we maybe need to get onto art, specifically. There's obviously a lot of recommendations in your book, but we've got a lot of people here in the audience, we've got people watching at home. If you could give one tip to people about something they should find, besides the main tourist attractions, talking about art in Paris, what would you recommend and why?
Every Thursday night, there's vernissage. So, the whole point of this book is, I had one person, I've had lots and lots of 5-star reviews, but one person hated it and said, I thought the book would be more sophisticated. And I kind of got upset, and then I didn't sleep in the morning. I had a radio interview and I went, that's it. I'm like, I didn't call it the Art Lover's Guide to Paris for snobs. No, it's Art Lover's Guide to Paris, and the whole point is that art, for me, I think it enriches all of us, and it doesn't matter on your education, it doesn't matter whether you've been educated, you haven't been educated, that you know about art, that you don't know about art. what's important is that art is accessible to everyone and art can be appreciated by everyone, and whatever you see in it. So on Thursday nights, all around Paris, you can go to Vernissage. You go there, you can go alone.
And by Vernissage, you just mean like
an art opening.
Right,
There's art openings every Thursday night. You can have a glass of wine. You can look at art. If you're by yourself and you don't know anyone and you're shy, you just look at the art.
And have you got one particular one to recommend for people?
No, because they're all the time. But if you go onto Facebook and you start going into art things, it will suggest a vernissage. You just walk around the Marais or Saint Germain
Can't go wrong.
on Thursday night, and you have wine, you have art, you meet people.
Can't go wrong. There you go. There's the tip Thursday night. I think we'll end it on that one. Thank you very much, and everybody check out the book.
And Thursday night.
And Thursday night is the book launch in the 10th arrondissement, Rue Lafayette.
At La Colonie.
Go and check it out.
6:30 on to late.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for being in the hot seat.
Thank you.
All right, so before we get to our next two guests, I just want to say a few quick words of specific thanks. The next guest was supposed to be Nico from KB Coffee Shop, who was recently on the podcast, but when he entered downstairs, I saw his passport. He's actually French. Where is he? There he is at the back, guilty at the back. No, but it's Nico and KB Coffee Shop that has done the catering. So all the food that you're seeing out there is from them. It's quite literally my favorite coffee shop in Paris. I'm there all the time, as Nico knows. And they've got a new cafe called Back in Black in the 11th arrondissement. Delicious food, seasonal breakfast all day. Is that right, Nico? There you go. So go and check that out, and thank you to them for providing the food for tonight. If we could have a round of applause for Nico. Keep those hands ready to continue applauding, because there's one more thanks I want to say before we continue. Kind of like an ad break in the middle of a podcast. I want to say thank you to who was meant to be the next guest as well, Michael from Pan Am Brewing Company, who I can just see just over there. Everyone look at him. He was meant to be the next guest, but then he got a terrible jet lag flying back from Japan. But it is Michael and the Pan Am Brewing Company that put on the beer for this evening. He has, and I can also say this quite genuinely, my favorite bar in Paris in the 19th, Pan Am Brewery. I'm always there. Not always there, that would be a bit weird. I'm there fairly regularly, and Michael was on the show recently, so if you want to hear more from them, but also while in Paris, Michael does a lot for young entrepreneurs. He said to me, if anyone wants to talk to him, Australian or otherwise, about businesses in this city, go and seek him out. Otherwise, just drink his beer. A round of applause for Michael, please. And with that being said, I want to welcome our next guest, a good friend of mine, been on the show a bunch of times, the esteemed author, John Baxter. Give him a hand. You don't really need an introduction with these people.
I'm sorry I can't be here, Oliver, unfortunately, but I have terrible jet lag.
Oh, well, good try. John, you're a friend of the show. You've been on it perhaps more than most people.
And I've never had any money from you, you promised.
It's coming, it's in the mail. The check is in the mail.
That's what he always says, yes.
Whoa. For those of you guys who don't know John, he's a prolific author. He's written dozens of books, many about Paris, but you're also Australian. And when we met, I think neither of us knew that the other one was Australian for
exactly.
like 2 years or something.
Except we did the secret handshake.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my first question, John, if you could explain the secret handshake to everybody. What is?
But then it wouldn't be secret.
Exactly. But when we were talking the other day, John, about people coming from Australia to Paris, you said that you've been here for a lot longer than many, and that there's been a change in the way people tend to travel from Australia to Europe. Could you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll say. I came over, would you believe, I came over when you had to come by boat.
Is that
30
true?
days on the high seas.
Was it 30 days?
30 days with 5 other people and the crankshaft in your cabin right with you.
Wow, like a reverse convict.
Yeah, it was. Yes. not inaccurate. And yes, I arrived in England in 1969. There were still dinosaurs in the streets, you know. When I came here, the first time I went to Paris in 1970, there was still the trees along Champs-Élysées, along Rue Saint-Michel had been cut down in les événements, as they like to call them. Right. And what I noticed, talking of the difference between the way Australians view Paris, I came over with all these people whose idea of a European holiday was you stay a year, you'd spend a couple of months in London, down in Kangaroo Valley and Earl's Court, of course, making noise all around London. Then you'd buy a combi van and you'd travel across Europe sampling the beers of every imaginable nation. And then you would come back, you would sell your combi van in the street behind the Australian consulate, and you'd go back home. I stayed, you know, I saw waves of Australians come and go. And I thought, why are they leaving? What is there in Australia that could be better than what's here? And this was 69, 70, 71, when really it didn't have any of the amenities. People, when you came to France, people didn't speak English. Waiters, you know, gave you that eye.
Does that eye still exist from the waiters?
Not so much.
No.
You have to look around for it. It's offered as an optional or a special on certain tours.
Yeah.
I just got used to the hostility, and gradually over the years I've seen it all change. Until now, one is welcomed. As the ambassador says, you know, Australians are the flavour of the month. People are fascinated by what we do. They're fascinated by the music. They're fascinated by the films and the art and so on. And I must say, I don't feel comfortable anymore. I think I should move on, maybe into somewhere where there's a little more hostility, because I got used to it.
Wow. But you've been over here since the late 60s.
Well, yeah.
Do you not miss Australia at all?
No.
Really?
Next question.
What about Paris? Now, you're an author here. You've written a recent book. You've spoken about people coming here for a year. Your most recent book is A Year in Paris. What's the idea behind that one?
Well, I was fascinated by the way in which seasonality is very central to the French. You know, that they really are a rural people, and things operate according to the seasons. There is a sense in which there is a time to sow, a time to reap, a time to dance, a time to die, and so on. You know, all of that really exists. And since we spent some time down in Charente, where my wife comes from, I have a sense of the differences in the seasons in areas all around Paris. I became fascinated with that. I mean, why does everybody leave in August? You know, why do people celebrate the Fête du Roi on 12th night? You know, why do people do this? Because for the French, the seasons are absolutely crucial. And then I found that during the 1789 revolution, there was an attempt to rewrite the calendar and change the names of the months to something more appropriate. Thermidor, the month of heat, Fructidor, the month of fruit. And it turned out that the man who was responsible for this lived on our street. So, well, of course, what else would I want to write about? But
I've read the book. It's fantastic. Everyone who hasn't should do it, and you should also turn to page, I think, 240, where I'm in the book.
Exactly. You'll have to pay me.
But I think our time's already run out, so everybody keep clapping. John Baxter, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome our next guest to the stage. It's Amanda Chapman from the Moulin Rouge. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, when I say from the Moulin Rouge, I'm underselling it a little bit because you're the lead dancer.
I am.
What's all that about? What does that mean?
I was very lucky to have the opportunity to be able to be the lead dancer.
Right, but I mean specifically, is there like...
When I'm on stage, there's only me and one other girl.
Right, wow.
Yeah.
And how many other girls are there altogether?
In total, we're 33 per
Goodness
night.
me.
It's a fair few.
And something kind of funny that we were talking about on the topic of tonight, you're not the only Australian at the Moulin Rouge.
I am not. We're actually a little bit of a mafia.
And now the mafia continues.
We're actually 45% of the Moulin Rouge is Australian.
That is...
So we're a huge percentage.
I like to think, I'm not sure if this is the case, but I like to think that sort of if you guys are singing along while you're dancing up there, there's a strong Australian accent if anyone's sitting close enough.
If they sit close to us, I'm pretty sure they can hear some of our accents coming out.
So 1 in 2 people there are Australian, 1 in 2 of the dancers. That's amazing. Does that mean that that the Australian, like, are you all sharing Vegemite backstage? And I'm being quite serious, like, you know.
I must admit, we have often birthday parties and things like that, and there's a lot of fairy bread. People that actually know what that is.
How many people here know what fairy bread is, out of interest?
That
about 45%,
stuff.
I think.
Yeah, so we do lots of those things to kind of remind us of home, and we all live away from our families, so we kind of trying to recreate our own little family at the Moulin.
Right, and it is pretty like a tight-knit thing there, isn't it?
We are, yeah.
And what's it like, as I understand, you guys you're busy. Like, you're doing, what is it?
We work a lot. I work 6 days a week,
Right.
and we do 2 shows a night.
Okay, wow.
So, yeah.
And I think the question that I think I asked it to you when you were on the podcast, but has anything ever gone wrong?
Well, there are many things have gone wrong, as in all show business. But unfortunately for myself, there was one time I was in a lift, so I was on the boy's shoulder.
Hang on, so the boy lifted you up, you were standing on his shoulder?
No, I was sitting on his shoulder.
Okay.
And he spun me around a couple of times. As he put me down, I have to turn and run. And
Hang on, what does that mean? You got to just turn and run it?
Yep,
Okay.
turn and run, half a turn, and run. So happened to be when he turned around, he wasn't quite in the right spot. I turned and ran, but I hit my head on a wall. So a little bit dizzy, a little bit of a back step to go around the wall, and then kept going with the choreography as if nothing happened.
What, with blood running down your face? Or?
That would have been a little bit dramatic, but no. A little bit of an egg at the end, but that was about it.
Do things go wrong there, like off, or is it? Because it's such. I've seen the show; it's so polished, and I kind of like imagining what's really going on with you guys. You know?
Oh,
like,
definitely. There's lots of things that happen, as in all shows when there's like these huge costumes and things like that. We've got all these dresses behind us, so if something rips, they're there to resew it back together before we go on for our next entrance, or the feathers and things like that. They also sometimes break, or whatever else has to make sure it's perfect for when we go back on.
And it's been going, the Moulin Rouge, for 130 years.
Yeah, we just had our 130-year anniversary.
So what did you do to celebrate?
We actually did a can-can at the front of the Moulin and had a big fireworks display.
What do you mean, just right there on the boulevard?
On the boulevard, on the road, we did a can-can.
And what was the reaction to it?
There was a huge crowd. We
Right.
actually had an amazing crowd and a big support to actually help us celebrate that moment.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Paris. A question that I actually intended to ask all the guests, so you guys will have to check out the blog afterwards for their answers. But you've been here for quite a while now. What is it?
I've been here for 13 years.
13 years, so you're a lifer, in other words.
A little bit, yeah.
After 5 years, that's a life sentence, I think, more or less. That's a good thing. I'm not saying it is a bad thing.
Well, I think it's a good thing.
But what would be, if you were to give a tip, like a lot of people here live in Paris, a lot of people watching maybe a tourist, if you could give one tip to everybody that you like doing in Paris for their visit, what would you recommend? And don't say the Moulin Rouge.
Come and see me at the Moulin Rouge. What else could I say? There's so many amazing things. I love to walk around Paris just to see the sights and all the beautiful architecture that they have here, the small little coffee shops that you can go to. For me, it's Rue Montorgueil.
Oh,
It's one of my
yes.
favourite streets to go into, little cafes and little ice creameries and things like that. It's, there's so many corners in Paris that are amazing.
Rue Montorgueil was, for a long time, my favourite street in Paris until I walked down Rue des Abbesses. No, not a fan? Jeez.
Well, it's
That's right. Is it too
kind of the
close?
neighbourhood,
Yeah,
so
right, fair enough. Maybe we
seen
can-
that a bit.
Maybe we can finish on a little tip for people who maybe want to visit the Moulin Rouge. Any tips on any tips on when to go, or which show is the best, or what seats to get, or anything like that?
Do not sit too close.
Why not?
Well, we're very close.
Okay. Well,
You want to see a whole show, so try and get a seat that's in the middle, but at the same time the shows are packed a lot, so make sure you book your tickets in advance.
there you go, guys. That is the word, the inside word from Amanda Chapman, the lead dancer at the Moulin Rouge. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the applause. I'd like to finish on 3 things before we get on with the evening and the mingle. 3 things, 2.5 minutes, believe it or not. I want to say first a little explanation in case you don't know what you're watching right now, which I find a little bit hard to believe, but we'll go with it. If you don't know, my name's Oliver G. This is the Earful Tower. It's a play on words based on the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, you guys get it. I do a podcast every single week where I have interesting guests like the people you've just met, and you can subscribe to it wherever you find podcasts. That's what I do, and that's who I am. I wanted to say a few words of thanks. That was the second thing. I've written it down on the paper. You guys can see anyone that you want to find more information, it's all there, but I'm going to run through it specifically for 1 minute here. I want to thank French Today, who is the sponsor of the podcast, Camille and Olivier. Over there, if you guys want to learn language, French Today, they're the ones. Hold the applause for the end because I'm going to do a few. But thank you very much for sponsoring the show and for being here tonight. Go and learn French with those guys. And believe me, that was the last applause you're going to do to the end because I got a lot to get through right now quickly. I want to thank again KB Cafe. Thanks for the catering. It is delicious. Thank you, Nico, wherever you are. And be sure to go and taste some of that stuff. Check out their cafe, Pan Am Brewing Company. Fantastic beer. I've said it. Go and check it out. Now, a few more here. Paris with L&M Photography. They're doing the photos for this evening. I'll share them. You'll see big cameras around. If you want to do a little photo shoot while you're in Paris, you should do it with them. Slim and the Beast, the musicians, they've on episode 1 of the podcast, they're going to be playing afterward. All right, you get away with an applause for those guys. They do the jingle. They already played the song, the Honeymoon song. They're my favorite band in Paris. They know it very well. I want to thank the Patreon supporters, the people who pay a monthly pledge for the podcast. Without you guys, and you know who you are, it's most of the people here, I would have given up a long time ago, so that sincerely means a lot to me. And I want to say special thank you to the embassy, to His Excellency, to Roman for organising and for having us this evening. Hold that applause for a second because I've got a little way that I organised to say thank you. I talked to the guys over at the Eiffel Tower and I said, keep an eye on us. And when I start clicking, maybe you could, oh, you can't see me. Thank you very much. I think that's a very fitting way to end the show. So that thing's going to sparkle for the next 5 minutes. Take your pictures, mingle around, have a good time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching those guys at home. And I'm going to pass it over to Slim and the Beast for a bit of music. Thank you again. Thanks very much.
Okay, so there you have it. That was the event. I wish you could have been there as well in the room. It was quite a thrill having, 100 listeners in the room at once. It was quite daunting, to be honest. But for you guys, if you are interested in coming to events like this, I obviously don't do them every week, but all the invites went out to the Patreon supporters, the people who make this show happen. Join them on patreon.com/The Earful Tower. There are loads of bonuses, not to mention events that you'll get invited to before anybody else. Now, what I wanted to talk about while we're on Patreon is I had a few helpers, 3 in fact, who helped make this event happen and who've been pretty busy behind the scene over the past 6 weeks. Their names are Zach, Alice and Juliana. And what I did is after that show that you just heard, we came into the studio, the 4 of us, and we broke down everything that happened because we were all running around like crazy. A lot of weird things were happening. Wine that was supposed to be delivered was never delivered. One of these, Juliana, one of the interns, had an unexpected run-in with the mayor of Montmartre who was in the crowd. There's a few little stories and we just had a laugh, a sort of a debriefing session, and that's a bonus little podcast for you Patreon supporters. Go and check it out. It'll be there to listen to. Now, I'd recommend you listen to this one first. Hope you've done that. The other thing I wanted to say, because of the timing of the lights going off, is I wanted to do a specific shout out to 4 Patreon supporters who were in the crowd, but I ran out of time. So, Shelley Bittler, Catherine Watt, Courtney Lecombles and Meredith Mullins. I wasn't reading that. That's in my head. I'd prepared that ready for Tuesday night. They've been Patreon supporters for 2 years. I hope you're listening because you guys mean especially much to me. So thanks for being there. Thanks to all the other Patreon supporters. You guys are also going to see my guide to Paris. I've been working on it like a madman behind the scenes. It's going to be coming out shortly and free for Patreon supporters. The rest of you will be able to buy it at a later period. Now, I want to talk to you about French Today. It's kind of a touching. Usually I'll talk about, how I do their audiobooks and what I've learned. But while we're on the buzz of the event, I'd like to just sort of say thank you to them. What they do, first, let me rewind a little bit. If you're new around here, these guys have been sponsoring the show since the start of this year. It's Camille, it's Olivier. Together they run a 2-person company. They do a lot of work and it really is reflected in their product. They'll teach you French. Why do you think I speak French? Well, I do live here, but their audiobooks are fantastic. So I want you to check out those. But I want to say more of a personal message this time around. Those guys came down from Brittany for the event, which is very touching and humbling just in itself. They were sitting there on one of the big couches. I had my eye on them. I think you will have heard that I gave them a little shout out in the show. But they came down and it was really touching and sweet, not just that they made the trip, but that a lot of the listeners got a chance to meet Camille and Olivia, who've both been on this show, and have a sort of merging of, of audiences and to see it all in person. A lot of people have been listening to the voices of Camille and Olivier on the podcast, on their audiobooks, but to have them there in person was especially brilliant, and it means a lot from the bottom of my heart that they've sponsored this show for so long. They're a small company, I'm a small company, and they took this chance on the Earful Tower podcast to help it grow. So a huge thank you to them. If you go back and listen, I've done about 10 episodes with Camille where you can get a real in-depth look at how to learn French and sort of beyond that, like methods to learning French, tricks and tips for improving quicker. They really know what they're doing. So once again, in all sincerity, French Today, go and check them out for audiobooks. They often have a sale on if you time it right, and right now is an example of the right time. FrenchToday.com/earful10. That's 1010. You'll get a further 10% off all of their audiobooks. Check them out. They're making this show happen. French Today. And on a personal note, Camille and Olivia, it was so lovely to have you at the embassy with me. And that picture that we got out on the balcony that you put on your Instagram account, top notch. So thank you to you guys. As for everybody else, thanks for listening. This is the season finale, as I said. I'm going to do a few best of episodes before we get into season 7. I can't believe I just said that, season 7. And I have some very specific, tangible ideas for how that season is all going to be woven together in one linear storyline. So keep an ear out for that. I'm going to rest my voice. I'll talk to you again on Monday. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
I don't really know where we are. I just wanna